Welcome back, coin collectors and treasure hunters. Today we're diving deep into the exciting world of coins small in size, but potentially huge in value. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting out, you'll want to stick around as we reveal the top 3 Canadian 5-cent coins. The first up. The 1982 Canadian 5-cent coin might look like an ordinary nickel to the untrained eye, but hidden within the world of numismatics, it holds a reputation for being one of the most intriguing and valuable coins of its era. Today, we are going to dive deep into the story of this small piece of Canadian history, a coin that collectors are constantly searching for, and which in certain conditions has sold for astonishing prices at auctions. The 5-cent coin in 1982 carried the iconic beaver design on the reverse, created by G. Kruger Gray, and Queen Elizabeth II's effigy on the obverse, designed by Arnold Mackin. Now, what makes this particular year so interesting is not just the regular mintage, but the fact that 1982 saw important changes in Canadian coinage. For decades, Canadian nickels were struck in nickel metal, but in 1982, the Royal Canadian Mint introduced major adjustments to the composition. Earlier nickels were 99.9% nickel, but due to rising metal costs, 1982 became a transitional year when some coins were struck in pure nickel and others in the newer copper-nickel composition. This change gave rise to varieties and rare transitional errors, which makes certain 1982 5-cent coins incredibly desirable. Collectors know that transitional errors happen when the mint accidentally strikes a coin using the wrong planchet or a mix of old and new specifications. For 1982 nickels, these varieties can be worth far more than their face value, with some examples selling for hundreds and even thousands of dollars depending on their condition, rarity, and grading. The journey of the 1982 nickel's value begins with understanding the minting process. Imagine millions of coins being produced, yet only a handful carrying mistakes that slip past quality control. In 1982, the Royal Canadian Mint struck over 140 million nickels, but buried among this mountain of ordinary coins are those rare treasures collectors crave. Some were struck with the old nickel planchets when they were supposed to be struck on copper nickel, creating coins that are technically errors, but highly prized. These transitional strikes have been authenticated by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC, and when they show up in high grades, they can command spectacular auction results. Now, most circulated 1982 Canadian nickels are only worth face value, maybe a little more if they are uncirculated, but the real gems are the error varieties. There have been reports of certain 1982 nickels graded MS 65 or higher selling for prices in a range of $500 to over $1,000, which is extraordinary for a modern Canadian 5-cent coin. The key lesson here is that condition, rarity, and authentication are everything in the numismatic market. If you happen to come across a shiny, original 1982 nickel, you might want to examine it closely because its value could surprise you. Another fascinating angle to this story is the cultural and historical background of Canadian coinage in the early 1980s. Canada, like many countries, was facing economic pressures due to rising inflation and fluctuating metal prices. Nickel, the main component of the 5-cent coin, was becoming too expensive to justify for mass production. This was the driving force behind the switch to copper-nickel, a mixture of copper and nickel, which was cheaper to manufacture. Yet this very transition created the accidental rarities we talk about today. So, in a way, global economic conditions directly influence the creation of a collectible treasure. It's fascinating to think that a decision made purely for cost efficiency ended up making some coins far more valuable than they were ever intended to be. And when we consider that most people spent these coins without a second thought, it makes the survival of pristine, uncirculated, and error specimens even more incredible. Collectors today are willing to pay premiums for these coins not just for their rarity, but also because they represent a unique story in Canadian monetary history. Let's talk more about the design itself, because design also plays a role in desirability. The 1982 nickel features the beloved beaver motif, a symbol that has been on Canada's 5-cent coins since 1937. This enduring design is one of the most recognizable in Canadian coinage. On the obverse is Queen Elizabeth II, but not the later mature portrait many of us recognize. Instead, it was the young profile of the Queen designed by Arnold Machin, which was used from 1965 until 1989. That portrait gives the 1982 coin a distinct character, linking it with an earlier era of Canadian coinage. Collectors often appreciate the artistry of the design in addition to the rarity of the minting process. When you combine beautiful design, historical importance, and rare minting varieties, you end up with a recipe for coins that can reach high values on the collector's market. But how do collectors actually determine whether a 1982 nickel is valuable or not? This is where grading comes in. Professional coin grading services evaluate coins under strict conditions, examining strike quality, luster, surface preservation, and any unique features. A 1982 nickel in poor condition will not fetch much money, but an example in mint state, especially with a transitional error, can be worth hundreds or even thousands. For example, an uncirculated 1982 nickel with full sharp details and brilliant luster might be appraised at several $100s by itself. Add in a rare error, such as a composition mismatch or a double die strike, and the value skyrockets. Collectors also love coins with a strong provenance, those with a documented history of auction sales, known pedigrees, or those that come from famous collections. All of this adds up to a story that makes the coin more than just a small piece of metal. It becomes a treasure with a narrative now. Let's imagine for a moment you stumble across a jar of old Canadian nickels from the early 1980s. How do you know if you've struck gold? First, look at the condition. Shiny, uncirculated coins are always a good sign. Second, check the weight and composition. A pure nickel coin will weigh slightly more than a copper nickel one. So if you have access to a precise scale, this could be the first test. Third, look for any striking errors, like doubling in the lettering, unusual edges, or weak strikes. If you suspect you have something unusual, getting the coin professionally graded could be worth the investment. The thrill of potentially holding a rare 1982 nickel worth hundreds in your hands is one of the reasons coin collecting remains such an exciting hobby. The ordinary can become extraordinary, and the smallest details can transform a simple 5-cent coin into a numismatic jewel as we continue exploring the most expensive 1982 Canadian 5-cent coins. It's worth noting that auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Canadian firms have occasionally featured these coins in their sales. Prices realized often depend on how many bidders are competing. The next up, the 2008 Canadian nickel can hold secrets of rarity, error, and exceptional value. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating story of the most expensive 5-cent coin from 2008, a coin that on the surface looks like any other nickel you might find in your change, but under the careful eye of a collector can reveal itself to be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Over the next half an hour, we'll explore the design of the coin, the history of Canadian 5-cent pieces, the minting process that sometimes creates valuable errors, and the specific details that make certain 2008 nickels so special. We'll also talk about how to identify one in your own collection or even in your pocket change, and why collectors are willing to pay such high prices for coins that most people ignore. So, settle in as we uncover the story of a small coin with big value. The 2008 Canadian nickel was produced by the Royal Canadian Mint, which has a long history of crafting coins with precision, beauty, and quality. The 5-cent coin features a design that has been beloved for decades. The image of a beaver sitting on a rock, a symbol of Canadian industry and resilience, originally designed by G. Kruger Gray in 1937. On the obverse side, we see the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which in 2008 was the fourth portrait used on Canadian coins, created by artist Susanna Blunt. This portrait shows the Queen without a crown, a more modern and approachable representation that Canadians have come to recognize in their daily use of coins. At first glance, a 2008 nickel is just another example of Canadian currency, struck in steel and plated with nickel for durability. But as with so many coins, it's the subtle details that create rarity. In 2008, millions of these 5-cent pieces were minted, so most are extremely common and carry no premium value. However, certain errors and varieties stand out, and those are the coins that capture the attention of collectors. In the world of coin collecting, an error occurs when something goes wrong during the minting process. Maybe the die that strikes the coin is cracked. Maybe the planchet, which is the blank piece of metal before it is struck, is defective, or maybe the design is doubled or misaligned. Each of these possibilities can result in coins that are unique, and uniqueness is what drives value. The 2008 Canadian 5-cent coin has been known to appear with die clashes, off-center strikes, and even doubling in the details of the beaver or the lettering. To the untrained eye, these coins may look like mistakes or even damage, but to the collector, they are treasures. One of the most expensive examples of the 2008 5-cent coin is a variety that shows doubling in the inscriptions, especially in the words Canada and Elizabeth II. This doubling, called a double die error, is not created after the coin is struck, but rather in the actual die itself. That means every coin struck from that defective die carries the same unusual appearance. Collectors prize these coins because they're not only rare, but also represent a fascinating glimpse into the minting process. Another valuable variety includes off-center strikes, where the design is not perfectly aligned with the planchet. The further the design is off-center, the rarer and more valuable the coin becomes. There are also reports of 2008 nickels with planchet errors, such as coins struck on the wrong type of metal, which can make them stand out significantly in weight or color compared to a normal nickel. To appreciate the value of these coins, it's important to understand how collectors view rarity. In coin collecting, rarity doesn't always mean old. A coin for the 1800s can be common if millions were produced and survived, while a coin from 2008 can be incredibly valuable if only a handful of error examples exist. That's why the 2008 nickel can command such high prices, despite being relatively new. Some examples of these rare error nickels have sold for hundreds of dollars at auctions, and depending on the error and the coin's condition, the price can climb even higher. Collectors seek out these coins not just for their rarity, but also because modern errors tell an ongoing story about the challenges of minting technology, even in an age where machines are supposed to be perfect. Let's take a moment to reflect on why the 5-cent coin itself has such a place in Canadian history. Since 1922, the Canadian nickel has been made of various materials, including pure nickel, copper nickel, and more recently, multiply plated steel. The change in metal composition over the decades has also created collectible varieties, as the Royal Canadian Mint experimented with different methods to save costs and improve durability. By 2008, the nickel was firmly in its modern form, steel plated with nickel, but the minting process was still subject to human and mechanical error, which is why valuable pieces exist today. This ties into the larger narrative of Canadian coinage, where small details in design, composition, and error make ordinary coins extraordinary. Imagine holding a coin in your hand that most people would spend without a second thought, yet knowing that it's worth more than an entire roll of brand new coins. That is the thrill for collectors who search for the 2008 5-cent varieties. Whether found in pocket change, inherited in a collection, or purchased from a dealer, these coins connect collectors to the broader history of Canadian money and to the stories hidden in everyday objects. It's also what makes coin collecting such a rewarding hobby. The idea that treasure can appear anywhere, even in the smallest denomination. In conclusion, the most expensive 2008 Canadian 5-cent coin is not just about face value, but about rarity, error, and the passion of collectors. While millions of ordinary nickels exist, the few that carry minting errors or unique varieties stand out as gems in the world of numismatics. They remind us that even the most common coins can hide secrets, and that with a keen eye and some knowledge, anyone can stumble upon a coin worth far more than 5 cents. So the next time you get change and see a nickel dated 2008, take a closer look. You never know if you might be holding a small piece of Canadian history worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And that's the magic of coin collecting, finding extraordinary value in the most ordinary of places. Next up, the 2016 Canadian 5-cent coin has become a fascinating subject among coin collectors and has even produced some rare and valuable pieces worth far more than face value. Today, we're going to dive deep into the story of the most expensive 2016 Canadian 5-cent coin, exploring its history, design, minting details, errors, and why collectors are willing to pay a premium for it. This video will take you on a journey through the world of modern Canadian coinage. And by the end, you'll have a new appreciation for a coin you may have overlooked many times in daily life. So, let's begin with the basics of this coin. The 2016 Canadian 5-cent coin, like others before it since 1937, features the iconic beaver design on the reverse. This design, created by G. Kruger Gray, has remained largely unchanged for decades, symbolizing hard work and perseverance, values often associated with Canadian identity. On the obverse, we see the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, as is the case with all modern Canadian currency, designed by Susanna Blunt. What makes the 2016 issue interesting is that it was struck during a time when Canadian coin production was undergoing changes in composition and minting quality, which sometimes led to small variations and even rare mint errors. While most coins struck that year entered circulation and remain worth only 5 cents, a small number of unusual coins stand out and have been recognized by collectors as being worth significantly more. To understand why a modern coin like the 2016 nickel could fetch a high price, it's important to recognize the role of error coins and limited varieties. Error coins occur when something goes wrong in the minting process. This could mean an off-center strike, a die crack, double dies, or planchet flaws. In the case of the 2016 nickel, several error varieties have been reported, including double striking and misaligned dies. These errors can transform an ordinary 5-cent coin into a collector's treasure. For example, some known error nickels from 2016 have sold for hundreds of dollars at auctions, with values continuing to climb as more collectors seek them out. The rarity factor is key here. The Royal Canadian Mint produces millions of coins each year, but only a tiny fraction bear these mistakes, which is why they're so desirable. Another factor that plays into the value of the 2016 5-cent coin is condition. Like most collectible coins, mint state examples, those that have never circulated and remain in pristine condition, are worth far more than their well-worn counterparts. Collectors often look for coins graded by professional services, such as PCGS or NGC, with grades of MS, 65, or higher being especially sought after. A 2016 5-cent coin in such condition, particularly one with an error or variety, can easily sell for a few $100s, sometimes even more if demand is strong. For instance, reports from collectors suggest that some high-grade examples with noticeable doubling or planchet errors have been offered in the $500 range, which is incredible considering the coin's face value is only 5 cents. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if you have one of these rare 2016 nickels? The truth is, it takes patience, a good eye, and sometimes magnification. Common things to look for include doubling on the lettering of Canada or 5 cents, unusual shapes or cracks in the coin surface, or a strike that seems slightly off-center. Some collectors have also noted unusual luster or color variations, which may indicate differences in the plating process used that year. If you ever come across a coin that seems unusual, it's always worth setting it aside and doing some research or consulting a coin expert. The most expensive examples of the 2016 5-cent coin usually come from a combination of high-grade and rare mint error. Auction houses and online platforms like eBay have shown listings where error coins command significant premiums, with bidders competing to own a piece of modern minting history. It's worth noting that while older Canadian nickels, such as those made of silver before 1922, are traditionally more valuable, modern error coins like the 2016 nickel prove that even recent issues can surprise collectors with their rarity and desirability. This is a reminder to always check your pocket change, because treasures can appear in the most ordinary of places. Another fascinating angle is how modern Canadian coinage reflects the changes in minting technology. The Royal Canadian Mint is known for its advanced processes, including multi-ply plating and high-speed production, which are designed to reduce errors. Yet, despite this precision, no mint is perfect, and every once in a while, mistakes slip through. That's what makes error coins like the 2016 nickel so intriguing. They represent a rare moment where human or mechanical imperfection created something truly unique. Collectors love these stories because they show how even in a world of mass production, individuality still finds a way to exist. Beyond errors, there are also collectible versions of the 2016 nickel that were part of special mint sets. These coins, struck to a higher quality and sold directly to collectors, often carry additional value, especially when preserved in their original packaging. Some of these sets were limited in number, and their coins can also command higher prices on the secondary market. While not as rare as error coins, they still represent an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to understanding why some 2016 nickels are more expensive than others. In conclusion, the most expensive 2016 Canadian 5-cent coins are those rare pieces that combine condition, rarity, and minting errors. They serve as a reminder that value isn't always tied to age or precious metal content. Sometimes, it's about scarcity and collector demand. So the next time you come across a 2016 nickel, take a closer look. Who knows? You might be holding a small piece of numismatic history worth far more than its face value. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. The thrill of discovery, the excitement of history in your hands, and the possibility that an ordinary coin might be extraordinary after all.